Alrighty, so now it's time to start piecing this game together by creating a spawn manager. A spawn manager is just going to be an empty game object that is basically going to have a script on it that controls the spawning of our enemy ship as well as all of our power-ups. It's also going to hold game logic that controls the rules for how often to spawn things. So for example, we might want to spawn our shield every 5 to 10 seconds, our triple shot every 12 to 15 seconds, and our speed boost every, say, whatever seconds. Doesn't really matter. You'll be able to customize it yourself. As well as we'll be able to create logic to adjust how difficult the game becomes. For instance, how frequent we spawn our enemy ship in. And we can control that based on certain rules of the game, which we'll get into in later videos. So before we continue, this will be a great time to commit our previous section. So go ahead and go to collab, and let's go ahead and implement, let's go ahead and publish our changes, which was implementing enemy and power-ups. Go ahead and hit publish now, save the scene, and we are ready to go. Alright, so to start, let's go ahead and create a new empty game object. On PC, you can hit Control-Shift-N, or if you're on a Mac, it's going to be Command-Shift-N. And that's going to create an empty game object. You can also create an empty game object by going to the hierarchy, create empty. Let's go ahead and rename this to spawn manager. And this is just going to be an empty game object that's going to hold our spawn manager script. Okay, so we have our spawn manager script, we have our spawn manager game object. Let's go ahead and create a new script. We'll call it spawn manager. So spawn manager, and attach it to our, sorry guys, let me close this, and attach it to our spawn manager game object. So as you can see here, spawn manager drops on there. Okay, so we have the basis for setting up our spawn manager. We have a game object to represent the manager. It doesn't do anything, it's just an invisible object that houses our spawn manager so that we can create the logic to start spawning things in our game. Now, what's the functionality of a spawn manager? A spawn manager, its job is to spawn things. Well, how does it know what to spawn, right? So we're going to have game object variables that hold, we're going to have game object variables to represent the items we're spawning. So for example, we'll have a variable for our enemy ship. So here we'll have a private game object, and we'll call it enemy ship prefab. And then we'll also have game object variables for our power-ups. Now, instead of having 3 individual game object variables for our power-ups, because we have 3 different power-ups, we can just have an array of game objects that represent all of the power-ups. So to create an array, we can go ahead and say private game object, and to create an array, we use the square bracket syntax. And an array is just a fixed list of items. So for example, we're going to go ahead and type here private game object array, and then we'll go ahead and give it a name. So we're going to call it power-ups. And we can just go ahead and close it off like that. Now, if we go ahead and save this, we're not going to see anything in the inspector. So we need to add our serialized field attribute. Add that to both of them, serialized field, and head on over to the inspector. On our spawn manager, you'll now notice that we have the ability to add an enemy ship prefab, which we'll do from our prefabs folder. So we'll drag the enemy in there. And you'll see we have now a drop down of power-ups, and we can declare a size. This is the size of the array. So how many power-ups do we have in our game? We have 3. So put size 3. And now we can drag and drop those 3 power-ups into these individual slots. So for instance, for 0, we'll go ahead and make that the speed boost. Or we'll make that the triple shot, since that was the first one we created. Oops. So here you're going to take your triple shot power-up, put in element 0. In element 1, we'll go ahead and put our speed boost. And then in element 2, we'll pop in the shield. Okay, so save your scene, and now our spawn manager knows about the objects it needs to spawn. So how do we access the array of items? When working with an array, you access elements of the array using the subset of the subset index. So for example, we have 3 power-ups in that array. If I want the first array, I can access it by sub-0. So I say power-ups, brackets for the array in syntax, and then I can put 0. That 0 is going to get the first element of the array, which is our triple shot. If I wanted the speed boost, I would put a 1, and if I wanted the shields, I would put a 2. So that's how we're going to be spawning these into the game based on certain logic. So in the next video, we'll look at creating logic to indefinitely spawn while the game is running, and we'll also determine time rates for our different power-ups.